talk about the rule of thirds. You've probably heard of it. Originally used by painters, it has now been adopted by photographers and videographers. The rule of thirds is a guide for composing an image. So why is composition so important? Because it allows you to emphasize the elements of the image that you want your audience to focus on. If you don't put any thought into composition, your viewer won't know what the most important parts of the image are and might end up focusing somewhere else. But when you put thought into your composition, you communicate, "This is what I want you to look at." Yes, putting just a little bit of thought into how you compose your image goes a long way. So in today's video, we're going to talk about one of the most common guides for composing an image, the rule of thirds. We're going to go over what it is, how you can use it to make your videos look more cinematic, and some of the most common mistakes that I see people make. And if you stick around to the end, I've got a little hack for you, and I'm going to show you how you can adjust your video to use the rule of thirds in editing, even if you weren't thinking about it while you were shooting. To start off, what is the rule of thirds? First of all, think of it more as a guide than a rule, even though I know guide of thirds doesn't have as much of a nice ring to it. To use the rule of thirds, you draw an imaginary 3x3 grid over the frame of your video and then place the most important parts of your image on the lines of the grid. The points where the lines intersect is where you really want to focus, and also if you're shooting a person, a good rule of thumb is to line up their eyes with the top line. The basic idea is that you can create a more interesting and dynamic image by placing the subject off-center. It's important because it really gets you thinking about what you want to communicate in a shot. What are the most important elements that you want to focus on, and what do you want to put in the background? You, as the cinematographer, get to decide what the audience sees, and you can communicate a lot through good composition. So how do you use the rule of thirds? When you're shooting, a lot of cameras and phones actually have a setting you can turn on that puts the 3x3 grid over your image. So this can be really helpful, especially if you're new to using the rule of thirds. So find that setting on your camera and turn it on, and then you can start to line things up with the lines on the grid. And keep in mind, you can utilize all of the lines on the grid, you don't have to just pick one. So for this example, we've got the person lined up off-center, and then we'll line up the shoreline with the grid as well. Or if you have two people, you could group them together, or you can place them on separate lines on the grid. So that's the basic idea, and now the next thing I want to cover is some of the most common mistakes that I see people make when they're just starting out using the rule of thirds. I know I was guilty of making these, so hopefully I can help you avoid them. But before we get to the mistakes, I just want to let you know that you should definitely subscribe to this channel so you can keep getting daily videos like this that help you create awesome content. Alright, now on to the mistakes. The first mistake that I see a lot of people make, and one that I was definitely guilty of, is using the rule of thirds for every single shot you take. When I first learned about the rule of thirds, I basically thought it meant that I should throw centering out the window and never use it again. That's definitely not true. Centering is still a great way to compose a lot of shots, and you can still use it, but the rule of thirds is just another tool that you can use, and it's actually good to vary the way you're composing your shots. The next mistake you want to avoid is using the rule of thirds just for the sake of using the rule of thirds. You always want to make sure there's a reason behind the way you're composing a shot. For example, let's say you have a shot of a person against a blank wall, and you decide to crop it and line up the person with the rule of thirds grid. Unless the blank wall is an important part of the story, which is possible, we're not really gaining anything by seeing more of the blank wall than the person. So in this case, it might make sense just to center the person. On the other hand, let's say you have a shot of a person looking at the ocean. In this case, the rule of thirds makes sense because moving the subject out of the center, you get to see more of what she's looking at. And the last mistake is putting the subject just slightly off center. Either you center the subject or you go all the way to the rule of thirds line. Avoid doing something kind of in between, it just ends up looking awkward. Alright, now in order to show you how to effectively use the rule of thirds, let's look at a few more examples. I got all of these clips from the library of free stock footage on InVideo, so that's a quick little hack. When you sign up for InVideo, you get access to over 4,000 free stock videos that you can use in your projects. Alright, now I'm going to go over my editing hack that you can use if you forgot to shoot for rule of thirds in your camera. Head over to invideo.io and then sign up for your free account. And then we're going to open a project. On InVideo, you can turn on a grid that you can use as a guide. So here I have a clip of a person. I'm going to go ahead and just delete the title that's on here. And right now, she's centered in the frame. But let's say I want this to be composed using the rule of thirds. So what you can do on InVideo is just click on the clip, and then just drag it out, and that crops the image for you. And then you can just crop in a little tighter and then end up lining up your subject with the rule of thirds. So that's a really simple hack, really useful if you forgot to shoot for the rule of thirds or if you just want to change your image while you're editing. That's a quick rundown on the rule of thirds. And now that you know a little bit more about composing your shots, you're definitely going to want to check out this video where I show you 5 easy cinematic transitions that you can apply to your videos. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel because we publish daily content creation tips like this and you don't want to miss out. Thank you so much for watching. I'm
Đăng ký dùng thử miễn phí phần mềm tạo video tại trang web invideo.design.